Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile, and this is the DUNU Kima 2, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank DUNU for providing the Kima 2 for review. Do greatly appreciate it. DUNU, you rock. Alright, so the DUNU Kima 2, this will set you back $120 from your bank account, and it is a single dynamic IEM. It has what DUNU is calling an external magnetic DLC composite diaphragm dynamic driver. I was unable to determine what the size of that driver is. 20 ohms of impedance, 108 decibels of sensitivity, and a frequency response range of 5 Hz to 40 kHz. The DUNU Kima 2 comes in this very artistic box. Get a little bit of branding. And we have a high-res sticker. It's got to sound good. On the back side here, you get some specs. Taking off that sleeve, and you get a black box that says DUNU on it. And then when you open it up, you have a cutout area for the IEMs, and then an area for some accessories. Let's show you what accessories you get. DUNU provides you with some more artistic flair stuff. And then you get a nice carrying case. It says DUNU on it. It is white. Unfortunately, probably will get rather dirty. Even though it's a little bit on the big side, it is thin, and so it should fit in most bags. Probably won't fit in very many pockets. Hard shell, definitely going to protect your Kima 2. Opening it up, and you have an area here to hold some more accessories, and then a little strap to hold more stuff down. Overall, it's a nice carrying case. I really do like it. Those other accessories that you get are, get them out of here. Here we go. Get a little brush thing, and then you get a cable clip, and then you get a swappable termination. This is 4.4. It does come with 3.5 installed. We'll talk more about the swappable terminations. And then you get this bag of tips. There are 4 different types of tips. You get the more standard red stemmed black tip, which was okay. I found that tip fit me all right. Wasn't the most comfortable, but it was all right. Kind of made things a little bassy. Then you have another black tip with a blue stem. This is a more shallow build, not near as big as the red one, and these did not fit me. I was not able to use them. Did not hold the Kima 2 in my ears at all. And then you have the candy tip, and I found the candy tips were very comfortable, more comfortable than the red stem tip, and I also preferred the sound of them very much. They were more balanced and cohesive. And then you get the S&S tip, and I found that the DUNU S&S tip was my preferred, as it fit me the best and held the Kima 2, and also offered that more balanced and cohesive sound. And then you get the Kima 2. Now the Kima 2 has a cable that tends to get a little bit on the tangled up side. As you can see here, the cable is nice to a degree, but it has the twisties, unfortunately. So it connects with a 2-pin. It is a recessed 2-pin. Ear hooks are not the best. They are a little bit on the flimsy side, especially considering how much the shells of the Kima 2 weigh. And we'll talk about that, weighing 10.5 grams per side. Rubberized cable here, and then you have a cinch that does stay in place. A very small split that says DUNU on it. And then the cable turns into this fabric covered, and you go to the termination. A very small termination has the Q-lock swappable terminations, and you just twist the little ring, pull it off, and you can put on your 4.4 or your 3.5, and then you just spin it back into place. Overall, not a bad cable. It's lightweight, and for the most part controlled. The only problem is this rubberized part here twists up and kind of becomes tangled when you go to use your Kima 2. The shells of the Kima 2 are rather heavy, 10.5 grams each, and they're made of 5316 stainless steel. You got this kind of artistic cover for the faceplate. They're not the thickest size. They do have a step up, no wing, decent length to your nozzle, and then an angle that is pretty average. Overall, they feel durable. They look nice, and for the most part, they're fairly comfortable. Now, I did find that the blue stem tips were not comfortable at all. The red stemmed ones were okay. The candies were good, and the SNS is the best. I found that the SNS tips have enough length on them that they hold the Kima 2 in my ears very nicely. And as you can see, they're not super huge, not protruding out real far, but they are heavy. And so the longer that you can insert that nozzle in and kind of hold it in place, the Kima 2 is more comfortable. It would help if this cable, the ear hooks were a little bit more, had a little bit more tension to them. That would probably also help hold them in place a little bit better. But overall, I found that the comfort was about an hour, maybe an hour and a half before I had to take a break, just because of that weight of the Kima 2 just started bothering me. Isolation of outside noises is rather good with the S&S tips. The other tips didn't offer near as much isolation. The candies were the second best. I find it's probably about 55-60% of outside noises being blocked. A little bit better with the S&S. The things around the house that are fairly loud, coffee grinders, vacuum cleaners, really loud TVs, people talking excessively loud, are muffled, but you can still kind of hear them. Carrying on a conversation was kind of difficult. And then going around the neighborhood outside, louder vehicles, school buses, UPS guy, Amazon Prime, that type of stuff, you could kind of hear and muffle. But again, it was difficult, but they're okay when it comes to isolation of outside noises. The DUNU Kima 2, being 20 ohms of impedance and 108 decibels of sensitivity, are fairly easy to drive. I found that all dongles, DAPs, and desktop were able to get them to loud volumes with no problems. Plenty of headroom on all the different devices that I used. When it came to using them on a little bit more powerful source, it opened them up a little bit more. You got a little bit more sparkle and energy in the uppers, got a little bit more air in space, and also had a little bit better control in the bass. So I found that using them with a little bit more powerful of a device helped to improve and bring out the potential of the Kima 2. Now, you don't necessarily have to use them balanced, even though DUNU does include a 4.4 termination. But if you have a device that has 4.4 balanced, give it a try and see what you think. It may improve the performance for you. As far as sources, the DUNU Kima 2 does tell you differences in sources. If it's a little bit on a warmer, more thicker, robust side of things, the Kima 2 can get a little bit bloated and a little sluggish in the bass. And so I find that having something that's a little bit more neutral and more controlled in the bass sounds better with the Kima 2. Also, if you have something that has a little bit more sparkle, a little bit more zippity-doo-dah up top, the Kima 2 may sound a little bit more engaging, a little bit more energetic. So, how do the DUNU Kima 2 sound? So the DUNU Kima 2 has a more neutral and natural presentation. The bass extends nicely. There's a decent amount of rumble and grumble in the sub bass, and you can get a little bit of there. Now, this is not the most emphatic and the most energetic type of bass, especially in the sub bass, but there's a little bit there to let you know, hey, this track's got some sub bass to it. Mid bass and upper bass are more of the prominent feature in the bass. The mid bass has nice punch and slam. good enough kick to it, and overall it has decent texture. The upper bass also has a little bit there, and as mentioned earlier, on warmer sources and also on more bass heavy tracks, that bass can get a little bit sluggish and a little bit bloated depending on where it kind of hits in the frequency. And I found that that upper bass can bleed in to the lower mids a little bit at times. So depending on your source and what tracks you're listening to, that bass can be a little bit on the sluggish and a little bit bloated side. But for the most part, the bass stays pretty well controlled and has nice impact, punch, and slam. Going into the mids have a nice fullness to them, a nice lushness to them. There's a slight warmth about them. The upper mid region is slightly elevated, and it pushes the mids just a little bit forward and puts a spotlight on the DUNU Kima 2 mid-range. Now the mid-range has this nice engagement to it, and it has a nice natural tonality, and it does a really good job of portraying differences between instruments and vocalists, and it keeps them all separated, and nice layering and good depth in the mids, and you can really pick apart what's going on in the music, and you can really follow things through, and you can kind of nitpick each individual instrument and vocalist. Does a nice job of staying well controlled in the mids and giving you the full picture while giving you a little bit of a spotlight, but it's not force feeding the mids, and it's not really a mid-centric type of presentation where the mids are the complete focus, but they do have a little bit more of a highlight than the bass and the treble. And speaking of the treble extends okay. There's a little bit of a soft laid back in the upper treble regions, and at times I do wish that there was just a little bit more sparkle and energy and a little bit more bite and crispness. But the lower treble and mid treble has a nice presence about it. It's not as forward sounding as the mid range, but at the same time it still has a nice presence to it, and you get enough of that sparkle and energy and bite and crispness. The treble stays fairly well controlled and doesn't go into fatigue mode, and it's not a very emphatic type of treble, but it gives you just enough. The DUNU Kima 2 soundstage is pretty average. It's not anything expansive and super wide, but it's also not intimate and really closed in. The soundstage does a decent job of portraying differences in venues, small, medium, and large. And I find that you're never really going to get that wide open, grand, vast sound, but you're also not going to get that super intimate type of presentation. You'll be able to tell differences in venues, but it's not going to be this eye-popping, ear-jarring, wow moment. It's going to be, okay, this is a little bit smaller, it's a little bit bigger. This is right in between type of presentation. Depth is also okay. You're going to be able to look into the stage a little bit, and you're going to be able to hear things in front and behind each other, but not going to really be able to delve super deep into the presentation and nitpick things 3-4 rows back. Layering does a good job. Everything has its own little place, other than on those busier, more complex bass tracks and heavy hard-hitting bassy tracks. Then sometimes the bass sections will get a little bit bloated and sluggish. Imaging across the stage also does a good job. You can place things well, you can follow things across. It's not the most precise and accurate, but you definitely will know it's over in here, and it's a pretty small area. It's right here, and you can follow them across. You can also track things as they're in between and in front of and behind each other. As things move further back in the track, the things in the front will take a little bit more of the highlight, and the things in the back will seem a little bit hidden. The tonality of the Kima 2 is very natural and very accurate. Does a really good job of portraying differences in instruments and vocalists. You can definitely hear differences between like things in the family of the brass instruments, trombones, trumpets, baritones, French horns. You can tell the differences of what those instruments are. Same thing in the woodwinds. You can tell differences between saxophones, clarinets, flutes, oboes, that sort of stuff. Guitars and strings, also you can hear differences in the instruments. And pianos, it does a nice job of moving through the octaves and staying balanced and cohesive. Detail retrieval and resolution. The details of the Kima 2 is pretty good for $120 IEM. It's not the most detailed, and you're not going to be nitpicking and figuring out new things in your music, but you're also not going to be missing things either. It's pretty average for $120 IEM. It does what you need to do. You're going to get all the information that you need. Resolution wise, it does a good job. The only thing is that bass area can get a little muddled and confused on busier, heavier hitting tracks. So the DUNU Kima 2. I like this. I like this IEM quite a bit, and it has a nice approach, being more natural in its tone and timbre, and having a nice balance of being natural and neutral and being somewhat of a stage monitor, but also being a little bit of an all-arounder. How does it compare to a couple of other IEMs in similar price points? Well, you have the Moondrop Aria 2. Now, the Moondrop Aria 2 is more of an all-around listen, and it is a little bit more on the V-shaped side of things. Has a little bit more prominence in the bass, and you get a little bit more impact and a little bit more punch and slam. And it has a little bit more of a oomph to it when it comes to the bass. The mids have a little bit more prominence in the upper mid range and have a little bit more of a presence to it. They can have a little bit too much of a little too much aggression at times in the upper mids, and the treble definitely has more sparkle and energy and a little bit more crispness, and at times again can be just a little bit on the borderline of being too much in comparison to the Kima 2. Soundstage wise, the Aria 2 is wider, and you definitely can get a little bit more of that vastness and open sound. Doesn't do quite as good with depth and layering, and imaging isn't quite as accurate as it is on the Kima 2. And then detail retrieval and resolution, the Kima 2 is a little bit better in both of those regards. And tone and timbre, the Kima 2 definitely is better, as those upper regions on the mids of the Aria 2 don't sound quite as natural and accurate. And then you have the Kotori Zephyr. Now, the Kotori Zephyr is definitely a stage monitor, and it leans that way. And the Zephyr has very similar bass tendencies to the DUNU Kima 2, but the Zephyr has a little bit better control, especially in the upper bass regions. When it comes to heavier, harder hitting bass tracks, the Zephyr doesn't get all bogged down and sluggish like the Kima 2. Going into the mids, the Zephyr isn't quite as forward and is more balanced and cohesive with the bass and the treble. And the Zephyr has a little bit more airy crisperness to the sound overall. And then the treble also is very similar to the DUNU, but has a little bit more bite and a little bit more edge and crispness to it. Soundstage wise, the Zephyr is wider, has better depth and layering, and also is better detailed and resolving, and has more natural tone and timbre. The DUNU Kima 2. I like this. It's a good $120 IEM, and it has nice natural tone and timbre, and it has a very organic, pleasurable musical approach to its presentation. And I think a lot of people will just enjoy it for its pleasurability. It's not aggressive, but it's not also laid back and boring sounding. It has a nice balance. It has just enough of a highlight in the mids. Bass does just enough to keep things moving, and the treble has just enough to keep things flowing without being ear piercing. So the DUNU Kima 2. I like it, and I recommend it. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links, notification bells. If you haven't already, check those off. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video, and check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information on there regarding how you can contact channel, follow channel, support channel. Speak of supporting channel, various ways that you can do that. One-time gifts through PayPal, Venmo, YouTube, And then you can do monthly subscriptions with Patreon and YouTube memberships. I want to thank everybody who gives to the channel, whether it be monthly subscriptions or one-time gifts. Thank you very much for all that you provide. If you're interested in supporting the channel, check out the links down below for that. Speaking of the links down below, there's all kinds of other information regarding how you can contact channel, follow channel, support channel, gear recommendations, music recommendations, all kind of gear rankings, and all kinds of other things are listed down below. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music and that honesty is the best policy.